Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, we're dealing with airport Karens. Guys, specifically TSA agents who go on power trips. And one OP tells a story about the time they obeyed a Karen boss, and it results in millions of dollars going down the drain. I hope you enjoy the stories, don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So I've worked in aviation for nearly 20 years, from small airports to large commercial hubs. And like any industry, it's full of type A personalities, and those promoted up to their respective level of incompetence. Now, to protect those involved, I will not name the airports or the company I work for. At the time this story occurred, I had worked my way up in a company that's contracted to pump fuel into the aircrafts at one of the busiest airports in the US. My job was the supervisor, and I was in charge of fuel quality and safety adherences. The airport I worked at was growing, and it went from the middle of the pack to being in top 10 for total operations in about 3 years. As such, there was, and still is, a lot of construction going on to have more gates and parking areas created. This has involved restriping the gates and adding more jet bridges on the existing terminal. This usually is a pain, but it works for the most part when there's only so much room to work with. Now, for fueling, a hydrant system is commonly used, as it's far faster and more convenient than having tanker trucks going up to every plane. Instead, a piece of equipment is staged at each gate, and it hooks up to a pit in the ground where fuel is delivered directly from the storage tanks and can be pumped into the plane. These are large underground pipes, and once in place, they're rarely, if ever, moved. If you move your gate, that pit stays put, and it isn't as conveniently located as it first was. It might be too far from the plane, might be under the plane, etc. With that said, when the airport authority decides to add a new gate at the end of the terminal, I was invited to the meeting thanks to my position. Yes, I was expected to sit and nod or something, since every time I pointed out that the new gate would put the pit under the jet or on the wrong side, I was basically told, "We will make it work," or "This is the only way we can do it." After giving my input and trying to put my foot down, I was shut down for the 5th time, being told to leave it up to the big guys and their ideas. So I maliciously complied, knowing what the end result would be. So after 4 months of construction to expand the passenger waiting area and attach a jet bridge, that brings us to the first day of use. There's a ribbon cutting ceremony, and the first arrival is brought to the gate. And this is when the fueler calls me, because he doesn't like how he has to run his hoses and he wants me to sign off on his solution. So I pull up and I see the pit is under the left engine, and on 737s, the fuel panel is on the right wing. So he has to run the pit hose under the fuselage, which is full of passengers. This hose is a 3-inch inner diameter, and it's capable of delivering around 800 gallons per minute. Should a tug or anything hit that line, it'll get bad, and really fast. I say, there's no way we can use that pit, and there isn't another one to choose from. I advise the airline, and that's when they say, "Well, use a truck then." I responded, "We can't. The jet is within 20 feet of a wall of the terminal, and we can't get a truck in front. If we're behind the jet, we'll block the taxi lane, and no aircraft are getting in or out of 8 gates. We can't safely fuel an aircraft at this gate." Well, you can imagine how this went over. Within 15 minutes, I have the highest level person in town for the airline, the airport duty manager, the airport police, my GM, and the manager for the baggage loaders all at the gate. I explain the issue, and I state I will not allow fueling as it isn't safe to run pressurized jet fuel under an aircraft, and that the pit is underneath the engine itself. Both of these violate numerous regulations. My GM looks at it and he agrees. And this is when the airline head starts yelling, and the duty manager says he'll have to call the fire department. He says if they come and look and they say it's good, we're responsible to fuel. So cue the fire battalion chief coming up. He hears the issue and walks over to look. The guy then gets a rolling wheel measure and he walks it from the pit to the building and then back to his truck. He then comes back with a red tag and he puts the pit permanently out of service as it's way too close to the building. He then tells everyone that as he sees it, there is no way to legally fuel at the gate as it's too close to the building, and the fuel truck would block the fire escape path. So for the next 2 months, the airline used the gates as overflow with no fuel, meaning they had to bring the plane in with enough fuel already, or fuel it out on a cargo stand. Then it was cordoned off and demolished, and then the old lines were restored. I'm not sure how many millions that cost, but it had to be a few at the very minimum. Oh my goodness, guys, I bet OP was trying so hard to hide his "I told you" smile when everybody was losing their business. Like, I'm so surprised that with that level of construction going on, where they were installing a permanent structure, that they didn't take in account of all the variables before making the final decision. But honestly, that's typical, full of themselves upper management though. We don't care about your input, just do it and we'll make it work somehow. And this is exactly what they get. So about 2 months ago, I went to Cuba with my mother. It was an all-inclusive trip, so everything was pretty much paid for by Sunwing. Now, whenever I travel, I like to bring with me this cute 500 milliliter glass water bottle with this rubber pink casing I got when I was in China. Normally, this bottle wouldn't be an issue. There would be a few odd times when security at the airport would check it to make sure it was empty because it was clearly over the 100 milliliter maximum. But usually, they would let us go without a hitch. When we were traveling to Cuba, the bottle was checked and given back to us on our way there. But on the way back is a completely different story. There were tons of people flying out of the city the same day as us, so there were like 200 people waiting to check in at only 3 check-in counters. When we finally checked in, it had been about 2 hours since we got there. We were pretty tired from standing, so we wanted to get through the gates as fast as we could, so we took the shortest line in security. There were 2 people working at each bag area. At ours, there was a lady looking through the screen, displaying the x-ray, and a guy in charge of checking suspicious bags. When we put our bags on the conveyor belt, the lady began gesturing to her partner and pointing at the screen. The guy then proceeds to grab my stuff off the belt on the other side and asked us if it was our stuff, to which we replied, yes. The guy then carefully shuffles through the bag, but really, he just went after the water bottle because that's what I assume the lady pointed to. And this following dialogue is to my best recollection. The guy asked, "Is this your water bottle?" I reply, yes. He then says, "Okay, I'm gonna confiscate this because it's against the rules to bring this on board." Hearing him say that, I reply, "But it's empty." He then says, "Yes, but it's over 100 milliliters and that's against the rules." Me, confused, say, no, that's for liquids." He then says, "No. That's for the size of the bottle, and it's glass." And this is when I tell him we have this other bottle that's also glass. I then show him this bottle that indicates an 80 milliliter bottle of hot sauce we bought. And he says that's under 100 milliliters, so that's allowed. At this point, I wasn't sure if he didn't know the rules or something, because every time he answered, he sounded very unsure. I then say, "Well, can I see where it states I can't bring an empty bottle over 100 milliliters with me?" This is when he grabs a nearby plaque that labels prohibited items, and then he points to a wine bottle and says, "Right here." I then say to him, "But that's not allowed because it's alcohol." He then says, "No, it's not allowed because it's over 100 milliliters and it's a glass bottle." His tone at this point indicated that his real intentions were that he wanted my water bottle, because he was really grabbing arguments out of thin air. Me, trying to test his nerves at this point, say, "So, if I had a 100 milliliter glass bottle of alcohol, I could bring it with me?" He says, "No, because it's alcohol." Now, do you want me to take the cover off the bottle before it's sent to be destroyed? The guy then hands the bottle back to me to remove the casing. And keep in mind, there was some more bantering back and forth, basically saying the same thing over and over again. I was really pissed at this point. I really liked that water bottle. And it was clear the only reason he was confiscating the bottle was because the lady or he wanted it. So I took the water bottle from his hands. But since the only problem he seems to suggest it has is the size of the glass, I take everything else. So I stare right into his eyes as I remove the lid of the bottle, and then hand the rest back to him. The guy's face instantly became red with anger, and he aggressively throws the rest into the garbage bin. Shady, shady people, I tell you. And guys, with airports being mad busy and people just wanting to get on their flights a lot of the times, it makes it really easy to do stuff like this. And the thing is, a lot of people don't put up a fight for the sake of potentially missing their flight. Guys, I've had friends who've gone to Europe and they've had things like expensive packaged sweets taken from them, or like little souvenirs, or like clothing. I'm really glad OP took the lid. And this person comments, I knew someone who would ship shoes to South America one at a time. Otherwise, customs would steal the pair. And this person says, airport security in Panama tried to confiscate my bottle of Chanel perfume. My air travel approved size of Chanel perfume. I asked for a manager. And while waiting for the manager, I called TSA in the US and I got them to resend the email, which specifically states that this brand and bottle size was approved to fly. So the manager comes over and tries to confiscate my perfume, and I show him the email. The guy pretends he can't read English, and that's when I have my Hispanic boyfriend, who speaks perfect English with zero accent, translate it for him. And this is when TSA in Miami asked me to hand the phone to the manager. He turned red and I heard yelling. He then hands me the phone back, and the TSA said I shouldn't have any more problems, and they were filing an official complaint against that manager and airport for abusive confiscation practices, and they were going to warn the airlines about it. I smiled, put my perfume away, and thanked them. I got on my plane. See, this is the kind of shady stuff I'm talking about, guys, and you really have to wonder how often they're doing this to people, right? Like, if you're confiscating expensive perfumes that are allowed, it's got me wondering what other goods they're taking on a daily basis. Okay, one more comment, and this has happened to me before, guys, where I've had to pay extra because my bag was a tad too heavy. Listen to how this OP handles it. So when I travel by plane, which happens about 2 to 3 times per year, I'm usually quite conscious about the weight of my luggage because of how much you have to pay if it exceeds the limit. This time, I put a bit more stuff in because of gifts, but I thought I was fine. I then pass security and get to the check-in, where a woman in her late 40s that reminded me of my old history teacher indicated me to proceed. So I give her my passports, do the usual stuff, and put my luggage on the scale, which shows 23.05 kilograms, the limit being 23 kilograms. Now, I was quite pleased with myself while looking at it, thinking that I got it just right. But no, the woman tells me that I need to pay 50 euros for excess baggage. I look at her confused, telling her that it's 50 grams, surely it doesn't matter. She then repeats herself and we start arguing until she says, either you pay the 50 euros or you somehow make the luggage 50 grams lighter. I also want to note that I did not have carry-on, so I couldn't take anything with me. At that moment, I realized I had 200 grams of chocolate that are sitting in the luggage, and that's when I start smiling. So I open my luggage, take the chocolate out, and start nibbling at it with a grin on my face while looking at the woman, who goes from Pikachu face to annoyed. The woman tells me to hurry up, even though I was the only one in line. So I offered her some and she just stared at me. I end up eating exactly a quarter of the 200 grams, and lo and behold, the scale showed 23 kilograms. The woman angrily gives me my ticket while glaring at me, and I tell her to have a good day. She probably thought F you in her head. Oh boy, I love that OP offered her some, right? And I also love the fact that this solution did not make the plane any lighter, nor would the 50 grams affect a baggage handler, which again is almost nothing. But I guess rules are rules, right? So many years ago, I worked for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The facility I worked at was a complex, and it had 4 different facilities and levels of inmates. There was camp, medium, max, and supermax. I had made the transport team, which usually consisted of busing guys to transfer facilities and medical appointments, etc. We also had to handle emergency transports to hospitals, or as in this case, WITSEC transfers. WITSECs are prison witness protection inmates, usually the guys who testified on the big bosses for lighter sentences. So as you can imagine, if someone recognized them, we had to move them pretty fast. So all transport teams had a go bag in our locker. Now, I was pretty new at the time, so I brought the bare minimums. I had a change of undergarments, soft pants, t-shirt, and I just picked up one of those pre-packaged toiletry bags from Walmart. So I come into work, and I'm walking down to my unit when Lieutenant intercepts me. It seems somebody effed up big time, and we got a Witsec and his co-defendant, the guy he testified against, in the same facility. So Witsec was snatched up, and we have to take him to a facility in Florida. The plane leaves in a couple of hours, and the driver's standing by. The inmate's belongings will be mailed. And why the big hurry, you ask? Well, both of these guys are maximum security, with a very high escape and threat to the public's safety rating. They also have gang affiliations, so basically, if one knew the other was that close, it could kick off a full-blown riot. And if I remember right, 3 people got fired for that F-up. So we were off to go grab our go bags, get the paperwork, and off to the armory. The guy required transport in a 5-point harness with a minimum of 2 armed guards. So we were issued a 9mm and 45 rounds of ammo each. We have 3 mags, 2 in our belts, 1 in the gun, and 1 round chambered. We're required to count each bullet before leaving the armory. Me and my partner get all the necessary documents, scoop up our guy, and off we go. We get to the airport in Denver, and there's a whole special procedure for check-in. One of the things was to give you a red card with your boarding pass, to let TSA know that you're law enforcement and you have a weapon with you. Now keep in mind that this was a few years after 9/11, and all this stuff was still new. We were told we have to take our inmate through security now, and we were taken a bit back by this, and we say, okay, and shuffle our guy on down. Now, once we show the gatekeeper our tickets and red cards, we're directed to a separate security line, where we secured our inmates in a holding room. We then had TSA verify our ammo count, weapons cleared, etc. We did all the paperwork necessary, and that's when TSA says, I need to scan your bags too. We both shrug and toss them on her belt. They buzz through, and the lady stops the belt and she's scrutinizing the screen. Finally, she says to me, I need you to open your bag. I give her a quizzical look, but I open it up. She then points to my toiletry bags and she says, open this. Now, since I'd never used it before, all I had to do was open the packaging and dump the contents out. The TSA lady then exclaimed accusatorily, "Aha." She then grabs the 1-inch long, maybe 1/4-inch wide pair of nail clippers. And I mean seriously, they were the smallest ones I'd ever seen in my life. The TSA lady snatches them up and then triumphantly looks at me, with all the smugness of a well-seasoned airport security monkey. And she informs me, these are contraband. This is the moment I stare at her, and I'm actually speechless for at least 30 seconds. I blink a few times, and I say very calmly, okay, then you keep them then. And I start to throw my stuff back in my bag. But oh no, Miss TSA isn't going down that easily. She very boldly informs me that she isn't my mother or my personal assistant, that I brought the contraband into the airport, and I can walk my happy ass right back outside with it. And yes, those were her exact words. I say to her, and then put it where? She replies, I don't care what you do with it, as long as it ain't here. This is when I tell her, if you truly feel that those clippers in my possession are a threat to security of the aircraft, then by all means, you keep them. But we don't have time to personally take them outside. And this is when she says to me, well, that's not my problem. You should have thought about that before you tried sneaking contraband on my plane. You of all people, you should know better. That's when I say, you do remember a few minutes ago when you and I counted out 45 rounds of 9mm ammunition, right? She then says, so? I say to her, well, in a pinch, I'm gonna say odds are pretty good, given my available options, that the last thing I'd use to assert control over an entire plane is the 1-inch nail clippers of doom. In fact, if I found myself left with no other options outside of the death clippers, I would just call the whole thing off. And by the way, my partner's been losing his lid ever since he realized she was dead serious. He's not as quiet as he thinks. The guy's snorting, gasping, and laughing on the other side of her X-ray belt. This is when TSA Karen says, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not throwing them away for you, and I sure as hell ain't letting you board my plane with them. I let her know, ma'am, maybe we can step back and take a logical look at this situation. We need to board our flight, and nobody can step foot on that plane until we get our inmate on and secured. I'm a federal officer, and my partner and I don't want to draw any more attention to ourselves than necessary for your safety and ours. I have a firearm and 45 rounds on my person. Surely if I can be trusted with that, I can be trusted with nail clippers. And I promise to dispose of them as soon as we land, so it'll never be an issue again. This is when Karen says, "I don't know who you think you're talking to, but it ain't me. I said take them and go." And seriously, she felt as though this was a mic drop moment as she said her piece, and she proceeds to back away, fold her arms, and stare at me. I just start laughing at the absurdity of the situation. I just grab the clippers, put them in my front pocket, and tell my partner, let's go. We go get our inmate and start shuffling him to the front. My partner's on the phone with Lieutenant and the captain, telling them what's been going on. They can't believe it, and they're pissed. At this point, we're being paged to come to Gate X to board. I get out of the TSA lady's sight, and I approach a different TSA security lady. I ask her to get a supervisor for me, as we now have an issue with our transport, and show her my red card. Well, she calls the supervisor with some kind of get your butt here now code, because within seconds, a supervisor's jogging up to us. This is when I ask him if he can kindly call Gate X for Flight Y and let them know that they're going to be delayed approximately an hour because I can't dispose of my contraband nail clippers within the airport. At that, he looks at me like a confused puppy with head tilt and everything. He says, "Huh?" while eyeing my weapon. I tell him I'm very sorry, I didn't realize I had clippers in my bag, and your TSA agent was very clear that no exceptions could be made, and I'm required to remove them from the premises before we can board. Unless, of course, if you wouldn't mind, could you possibly help me out so we don't have to escort him back through the airport? I pull the instrument of doom from my pocket and offer it to him. Well, to wrap this up finally, the supervisor takes the clippers, says he'll address this, and gives us a ride on the cart to our gate. We board, and the rest of the trip was uneventful. Well, aside from the non-stop hilarious quips that my partner was dishing out the whole time. He told the story to everyone we met on that trip. The warden even heard about that, and he brought us to his office so he could hear the story firsthand. Everybody thought it was funny after the fact. Again, rules are rules, right? But that was one power-tripping Karen TSA agent, hey? Like making a federal officer do her bidding, she must have felt so freaking powerful being that smug towards him. With that said though, I do think that what you can and can't bring on planes has changed a lot over the years. And I'm pretty sure you can bring nail clippers on board now in your carry-on. But listen guys, like if you can take over a plane with nail clippers, you deserve that plane in my opinion. And this person comments, there was a story from a similar time frame about a pilot who got arrested for trying to bring nail clippers on the plane with him. It probably didn't help that he responded with, "I'm the pilot, I could crash the effing plane." So yeah, and that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode, where a Karen pretends to be someone's landlord to take their driveway. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.